I returned from my 3-week business acquisition trip to Singapore, exhausted but exhilarated about closing the biggest deal of my career. All I wanted was to take my prized $28 million Rolls-Royce boat tail for a celebratory drive through the California hills. Instead, I found an empty garage and a casual text from my brother Danny waiting on my phone. "Thanks for letting me borrow the car. Sold it this morning for $32 million. Mom and Dad said you'd understand. Need the money for my downtown apartment." I stared at the message, my hands trembling, realizing my family had committed grand theft auto. My heart pounded as I read Danny's message 3 more times, hoping I had misunderstood something. The Rolls-Royce boat tail wasn't just expensive transportation. It was one of only 3 ever manufactured, a masterpiece of automotive engineering that I had waited 2 years to acquire. The waiting list had included billionaires and royalty, but my persistence and connections in the luxury market had finally paid off. I immediately called Danny, my fingers shaking as I dialed. He answered on the second ring, sounding cheerful and completely oblivious to the magnitude of what he had done. "Jarrett, welcome back, big brother. How was Singapore? I bet you closed that tech company deal, right? Danny, what did you do with my car?" My voice came out strangled, barely controlled. "Oh, that. Yeah, I found this collector in Dallas who was desperate for a boat tail. Guy paid cash on the spot, no questions asked. Actually got $4 million more than you paid for it. So really, I did you a favor." The casual tone in his voice made my stomach turn. "You did me a favor? Danny, that car was not yours to sell. How did you even get access to it? Mom and Dad have your spare key, remember? They said you wouldn't mind since you're always traveling anyway. Besides, family should share wealth, right? That's what Dad always taught us." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You forged my signature on the title transfer." "Well, technically, Dad did that part. He's gotten pretty good at copying your handwriting over the years. Look, don't get all dramatic about this. The money's already being put to good use." "What money?" "Danny, that was theft. Come on, Jarrett. I needed this apartment. The downtown penthouse market is crazy competitive, and I had to move fast. I put $20 million down as the deposit yesterday. Mom and Dad got $5 million for their retirement fund, which they totally deserve after raising us. The remaining $7 million is going toward renovations and furnishing the place." My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair beside my kitchen island. "You spent all of it already?" "Of course. Time-sensitive opportunities don't wait around. You should understand that better than anyone, being in acquisitions and all." The phone felt heavy in my hand. "Danny, I need you to listen very carefully. What you did is called grand theft auto. It's a felony. You could go to prison." He laughed, actually laughed. "Prison? For borrowing my brother's car? Jarrett, you're being ridiculous. Family doesn't press charges against family. It wasn't borrowing. You permanently sold my property without permission. Look, I know you're upset, but you'll thank me later. That apartment is in the perfect location for networking. I'm finally going to make something of myself. And when I do, I'll pay you back with interest." After hanging up, I sat in my empty garage for 30 minutes, staring at the oil stain where my boat tail used to rest. The magnitude of the betrayal slowly sank in. This wasn't some impulsive mistake. Danny had mentioned that our parents were involved, that Dad had practiced forging my signature. They had planned this while I was working 18-hour days in Singapore, negotiating the acquisition that would secure my company's future. I called my parents' house. Mom answered with her usual cheerful tone. "Jarrett, sweetheart, how was your trip? Danny said you'd be calling." "Mom, why did you give Danny access to my garage?" Her tone shifted slightly. "Oh, that. Well, honey, Danny needed help with his apartment situation, and you have so much money. We thought you wouldn't mind sharing a little with your younger brother." "Sharing? Mom, he sold my car for $32 million. "Yes, and wasn't that wonderful? He got more than you paid for it. You should be proud of his negotiating skills." The disconnect between her words and reality made me dizzy. "Mom, that car was my property. What Danny did was illegal. Now, Jarrett, don't be selfish. Family takes care of family. Your father and I sacrificed everything to give you boys the best education money could buy. It's time you showed some gratitude." "Gratitude? By letting you steal from me?" "We didn't steal anything. We borrowed something you weren't even using. That car just sat in your garage most of the time while Danny was struggling to find decent housing." The conversation continued in circles for another 10 minutes before I realized they genuinely believed they had done nothing wrong. In their minds, my success obligated me to support Danny's lifestyle indefinitely. I drove to the police station that evening, my hands still shaking with anger and disbelief. Detective Patricia Huang listened to my story with increasing concern. "Mr. Jarrett, what you're describing is definitely criminal. Grand theft auto, forgery, possibly fraud if they misrepresented ownership to the buyer. Do you have the original title documents?" "Yes, they're in my home safe. I also have all the purchase documentation from when I bought the car." "Good. We'll need those. This is a complex case because it involves family members, but the law doesn't make exceptions for relatives." As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to discover something much worse than a stolen car. The next morning, I drove to my childhood home in Palo Alto, my stomach churning with dread. The house looked exactly the same as it had when I was growing up. Pristine landscaping, freshly painted exterior, the kind of suburban perfection that had always felt more like a stage set than a home. Dad answered the door wearing his weekend golf attire, looking completely relaxed. "Jarrett, good to see you, son. Come in, come in. Your mother's making her famous blueberry pancakes." The normalcy of his greeting felt surreal after everything that had happened. I followed him into the kitchen where Mom was indeed cooking, humming contentedly, as if we were gathering for a pleasant family brunch. "Sit down, sweetheart," Mom said without turning around. "I'll have a plate ready in just a minute. I'm not here for breakfast. I'm here to talk about the car." Dad settled into his usual chair at the head of the table. "Oh, that. Look, Jarrett, I know you're upset, but let's keep this in perspective. Danny needed help, and you have more money than you know what to do with. Dad, you forged my signature. That's a felony." He waved his hand dismissively. "Felony, misdemeanor, all just legal technicalities. I've been signing your name since you were a kid. Remember when you broke your arm in 8th grade, and I had to sign your permission slips?" The comparison was so absurd I almost laughed. That was completely different, and you know it. Mom finally turned around. Carrying a plate of pancakes, she sat in front of the empty chair across from Dad. "Jarrett, your father and I have been talking, and we're very disappointed in your reaction. We raised you to be generous and family-oriented. This selfishness is not attractive." "Selfishness? You stole my car. We helped your brother when he needed it most," she replied firmly. "Danny has been struggling for years while you've been getting richer and richer. It's time you showed some responsibility toward your family." Dad leaned back in his chair. "Your mother's right. We paid for your college education, your business school, helped you get started in your career. You owe us, son." The word "owe" hit me like a physical blow. "I owe you? For being my parents? For giving you every advantage in life," Mom said, her voice rising. "Do you know how much we spent on your education? Your tutoring? Your networking opportunities? We invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in your success. That's what parents do. They don't expect their children to pay them back for raising them." Dad's expression hardened. "Well, maybe they should. Danny never had your opportunities because we'd already spent so much on you. It's only fair that you help level the playing field now." I realized I was dealing with people who had completely rewritten the rules of family relationships in their minds. This isn't about fairness. This is about theft. "If you take legal action against your own family," Mom said coldly, "you'll be cut off permanently. No more family gatherings, no more holidays, no more relationship with us at all. Is that what you want? The threat felt like emotional blackmail, but it also revealed something important. They were scared. If they weren't worried about legal consequences, they wouldn't be trying to intimidate me into silence. What I want is my property returned, and an apology. Dad laughed harshly. The car is already sold, son. That money is gone. Danny's apartment deposit is non-refundable, and your mother and I have already moved our retirement fund into protected investments. Then you'll have to liquidate those investments. We're not liquidating anything, Mom said. What's done is done. You need to accept it and move on. I stood up, my appetite completely gone despite not eating since yesterday. There's something you're not telling me. This feels too calculated, too prepared. How long have you been planning this? They exchanged a glance that confirmed my suspicion. Planning is a strong word, Dad said carefully. Answer the question. Mom sighed dramatically. Fine. We've been discussing it for a few months. Every time you went on these long business trips, Danny would call us, stressed about money, while you were off making more millions you don't need. A few months? Since around March, Dad admitted. We started researching the car's value, finding potential buyers, figuring out the logistics. We wanted to make sure everything went smoothly when the right opportunity presented itself. The premeditation made everything worse. This wasn't some impulsive family emergency. They had been plotting against me for half a year. And the forgery practice? Dad shrugged. I wanted to make sure the signature looked authentic. Took me about 2 weeks to get it right. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who lived 2 doors down from my parents. Is everything okay? I saw police cars at your parents' house yesterday asking about your car collection. I looked up at my parents. Police cars? What police cars? Mom's face went pale. We may have gotten a few questions about some of your other possessions. What other possessions? Dad cleared his throat. Well, remember that vintage watch collection you thought was stolen 2 years ago? The room started spinning. You told me those watches were stolen in a burglary. They were stolen, Mom said defensively. By necessity, Danny had gotten into some trouble with gambling debts, and we needed to help him quickly before things got dangerous. You sold my watches to pay Danny's gambling debts? We sold them to protect your brother, Dad corrected. Those men he owed money to weren't the type to wait around for payment plans. I felt like I was going to vomit. How much were those watches worth? About 400,000, Dad said casually, as if he were talking about pocket change. $400,000? And you never told me? We handled the situation, Mom said. That's what parents do. We protect our children. You protected Danny by stealing from me. We protected the whole family, she insisted. If those men had hurt Danny, it would have destroyed all of us. Besides, you never even wore those watches. They just sat in that display case collecting dust. I pulled out my phone and started recording our conversation. So let me make sure I understand this. 2 years ago, you stole $400,000 worth of my property to pay Danny's gambling debts. This week, you stole $32 million worth of my property to buy Danny an apartment. What's next? Dad stood up abruptly. Turn off that phone, Jarrett. This is a private family conversation. This is evidence of a criminal enterprise. Criminal enterprise? Mom laughed bitterly. You're talking about your own parents like we're strangers. What happened to you? When did you become so cold and calculating? When I realized my own family has been robbing me for years. We're done talking, Dad said firmly. If you pursue this legal nonsense, you'll regret it. We have lawyers too, and we know things about your business practices that might interest the IRS. The threat was vague, but menacing. I had always conducted my business completely legally, but the implication was clear. They were prepared to make my life difficult in any way possible. As I walked to my car, I realized that the people who had raised me were essentially strangers. The parents I thought I knew had been replaced by manipulative criminals who felt entitled to my success while contributing nothing to it. The drive home felt endless, but it gave me time to process the full scope of their betrayal. This wasn't just about money or cars or watches. This was about a fundamental lack of respect for me as an independent adult. In their minds, I existed solely to fund Danny's lifestyle and subsidize their retirement. By the time I reached my house, I knew exactly what I had to do. I spent that evening researching criminal defense attorneys who specialized in financial crimes. I needed someone who understood complex theft cases and had experience dealing with family perpetrators. The situation was emotionally devastating, but I couldn't let sentiment override justice. Monday morning, I sat in the downtown Los Angeles office of Sarah Patterson, one of the city's most respected white-collar crime prosecutors who had recently moved into private practice. Her office walls displayed an impressive collection of legal awards and newspaper clippings from high-profile cases she had won. "Mr. Williams," she said, reviewing the documents I had provided, "this is one of the most brazen family theft cases I've encountered. The premeditation aspect makes it particularly serious. Grand theft auto, forgery, fraud, possibly identity theft if they used your personal information to facilitate the sale. What are my chances of getting justice? Legally, very strong. The evidence is clear-cut. Emotionally, that's going to be much harder. Prosecuting your own parents will be painful, and they'll likely try to manipulate you throughout the process." She recommended I hire a private investigator to determine the full scope of their criminal activity. In my experience, what you've discovered so far is probably just the tip of the iceberg. That afternoon, I met with Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent who now ran a private investigation firm specializing in financial crimes. Marcus was methodical and thorough, exactly what I needed. "I'll need access to your financial records, property titles, insurance policies, anything that could have been compromised," he said. "I'll also run background checks on recent transactions involving your parents and brother." Within 48 hours, Marcus called me with preliminary findings that made my blood run cold. "Jarrett, we need to meet immediately. What I've found goes far beyond a car and some watches." We met at a coffee shop in Beverly Hills, away from my usual haunts. Marcus spread several folders across our corner table. "Your parents have been systematically monitoring your financial activities for at least 3 years. They have copies of your bank statements, investment portfolios, property assessments, insurance policies, even your business tax returns. How is that possible? Identity theft. They've been using your social security number and personal information to request financial documents, claiming to be helping you with tax preparation or estate planning. Most institutions comply with family member requests if they have the right personal details." I felt sick. "What else?" "They've opened 3 credit cards in your name over the past 18 months. Nothing major, just small purchases that wouldn't trigger alerts. But it establishes a pattern of identity theft." Marcus flipped to another page. "Your brother Danny has been living in your Colorado cabin for 8 months without permission. He's been using the property address to establish residency and has taken out a $50,000 personal loan using the cabin as collateral reference." "He what?" "The loan company believes he owns the property. If he defaults, they could potentially place a lien against your cabin until the ownership dispute gets resolved in court." The scope of their deception kept expanding. "How did he get access to the cabin?" "Your parents gave him keys and copies of utility bills with your name on them. He's been forwarding his mail there and using it as proof of residence for various applications." Marcus pulled out another document. "This is where it gets really interesting. I traced the Rolls-Royce buyer in Dallas. Legitimate collector, paid fair market value, but your brother provided him with forged documentation, claiming he was your authorized agent selling the car on your behalf. So the buyer had no idea it was stolen?" "Correct. Danny presented himself as your business representative, showed forged power of attorney documents, and even had fake business cards printed with your company letterhead. The buyer thought it was a completely legal transaction. My hands were shaking again. What about the money trail? Danny deposited the $32 million into a new bank account he opened, using fraudulent documentation. The apartment deposit was $20 million. Your parents received $5 million, and the remaining $7 million has been moved through several accounts to obscure the trail. Marcus leaned forward. Jared, there's something else. I found evidence that your parents have been planning to report the car sale as your unreported income to the IRS. They what? They've been preparing to file an anonymous tip claiming you sold the car and didn't report the income on your taxes. If successful, they would position themselves as public-spirited citizens reporting tax evasion, potentially making them eligible for a whistleblower reward from the government. The calculated maliciousness took my breath away. Not only had they stolen from me, but they were planning to frame me for tax crimes while positioning themselves as heroes. How much trouble could that have caused? Significant. The IRS takes unreported income very seriously, especially amounts this large. You could have faced criminal charges, massive fines, and years of legal problems. Even after proving your innocence, the investigation process would have been expensive and time-consuming. I stared at the documents spread across our table, each one representing another layer of betrayal. These weren't desperate people making poor choices. These were calculating criminals who had been planning to destroy my life while profiting from it. Marcus, I need you to compile everything into a comprehensive report for the district attorney's office. I also want you to trace every financial transaction they've made using my identity or my property. Understood. But Jarrett, be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better. People who are willing to go this far usually have more schemes in progress. That evening, I called Sarah Patterson to update her on Marcus's findings. This has escalated from simple theft to a complex financial conspiracy, she said. With this level of evidence, I'll be recommending federal charges. Identity theft across state lines, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit tax fraud are all federal crimes. Federal charges? Yes. Once federal agencies get involved, your family will be facing much more serious consequences. Prison time becomes very likely, and the investigation will uncover everything they've done, not just what they've done to you. As I hung up the phone, I realized there was no going back. My family had chosen to become criminals, and now they would have to face the consequences of that choice. The boy who had grown up in their house, who had believed in their love and support, was gone forever. In his place stood a man who understood that justice sometimes requires painful decisions. Marcus called me 3 days later with an urgency in his voice that I had never heard before. Jarrett, I need you to come to my office immediately. What I've discovered changes everything. I canceled my afternoon meetings and drove to his downtown office, my mind racing through possibilities. When I arrived, Marcus had several computer screens displaying financial records, bank statements, and what appeared to be surveillance photos. Sit down, he said grimly. What I'm about to show you is going to be difficult to process. He turned his laptop screen toward me, showing a spreadsheet with dozens of names and corresponding dollar amounts. Your parents haven't just been stealing from you. They've been operating a sophisticated financial fraud operation targeting multiple wealthy individuals in their social circle for over 4 years. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Multiple victims? At least 12 that I've identified so far. All members of their country club, their church, and their neighborhood association. They've been systematically gathering personal information about wealthy acquaintances and their families, then executing various types of financial fraud. Marcus clicked to another screen showing bank routing numbers and account information. They use the same basic methodology each time. They befriend wealthy families, gain access to personal information through social connections, then exploit that information for financial gain. How much money are we talking about? Conservatively, around $18 million over 4 years. But it's not just cash theft. They've been involved in real estate fraud, identity theft, investment scams, insurance fraud, and sophisticated documentation forgery. He showed me photographs of my parents at various social events, always positioned near people who appeared on his victim list. They're essentially professional con artists who use their social status and perceived respectability to gain access to wealthy targets. The images were devastating. My parents laughing at charity galas while secretly planning to rob their fellow attendees. Mom volunteering at church fundraisers while gathering personal information about congregation members. Dad playing golf with men he was simultaneously defrauding. "Show me the specifics," I said, steeling myself for what was coming. Marcus opened another file. "The Henderson family from their country club. Your parents convinced them to invest $2.5 million in a fake real estate development project. The Hendersons thought they were investing in luxury condominiums that would be managed by your dad's fictitious property management company. They created a fake company, multiple fake companies, complete with professional websites, business cards, letterhead, even fake employee profiles. They've been running this operation like a legitimate business, except the business is systematic theft." He scrolled through more examples. "The Morrison family lost $800,000 in a fraudulent art investment scheme your mother orchestrated. She convinced them she had connections to exclusive art dealers and could get them early access to valuable pieces." Each example felt like a punch to my stomach. These weren't strangers. These were people I had grown up knowing. Families who had attended my high school graduation. People who had celebrated holidays with us. What about Danny's involvement? Initially, I thought he was just an opportunistic beneficiary. But the more I investigated, the more I realized he's been a full partner in this operation. Marcus opened a folder containing phone records and email transcripts. Danny has been conducting surveillance on their targets' children, gathering information about schedules, habits, valuable possessions, security systems. He's essentially been their reconnaissance specialist. Surveillance on their children? Yes. Children of wealthy parents often post about their lifestyles on social media, showing off expensive purchases, vacation homes, family businesses. Danny has been systematically cataloging this information and reporting back to your parents. The revelation that my brother had been spying on people we'd known since childhood was somehow worse than learning about the money. It showed a level of calculated malice that I couldn't have imagined. "There's more," Marcus continued. "I found evidence that they've been recording phone conversations with their targets without consent, using those recordings to gather sensitive financial information." "How?" "Your mother has been hosting elaborate dinner parties and social gatherings, specifically designed to encourage guests to discuss their finances, investments, and business dealings. She records these conversations and uses the information to plan their next fraud." Marcus showed me audio equipment hidden in ordinary household items. "They've turned their home into a sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation." I thought about all the family gatherings I had attended over the years, all the times I had brought business associates to meet my parents, all the personal information I had shared in what I thought was the safety of my childhood home. "They've been recording me too, haven't they?" "Yes. For at least 3 years. They have extensive recordings of your phone calls, business conversations, discussions about your assets and investments. That's how they knew exactly when to steal the car and how to forge the necessary documents." The betrayal felt bottomless. Every conversation, every family dinner, every moment of vulnerability had been calculated manipulation designed to extract information they could use against me. "But there's something even worse," Marcus said quietly. "I think they've been planning to frame you for tax evasion as part of a larger scheme to claim ownership of your assets." He pulled up a series of documents that made my hands tremble. "They've been preparing forged tax returns in your name, claiming business expenses that never occurred, charitable donations that were never made, and income that was never reported. Why would they do that? If they could get you convicted of tax evasion, They could potentially claim your assets were purchased with illegal unreported income. As your immediate family members, they would have legal standing to claim ownership of property they alleged was purchased with criminal proceeds. The sophistication of their plan was terrifying. They hadn't just been stealing from me. They had been preparing to destroy my life completely, while positioning themselves to inherit everything I had built. Marcus, this sounds like something that would take legal expertise to plan. That's the final piece. Your parents have been working with a corrupt attorney named Gerald Whitman, who specializes in helping clients hide assets and manipulate legal proceedings. He's been providing them with legal advice on how to structure their frauds to minimize criminal exposure. A lawyer is helping them? More than helping. He's been their strategic partner. For a percentage of their proceeds, he provides legal frameworks that make their crimes harder to detect and prosecute. I felt completely hollow. The people who had raised me weren't just criminals. They were sophisticated criminals, working with professional guidance to maximize their illegal profits while minimizing their risks. What's our next step? We contact the FBI immediately. This has moved far beyond local jurisdiction. We're looking at federal racketeering charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and potentially RICO violations if we can prove they've been operating as a criminal enterprise. As I drove home that evening, I realized that my entire childhood had been a lie. The loving, supportive family I remembered had never existed. I had been raised by professional criminals who saw me not as their son, but as their most valuable long-term asset to exploit. The boy who had trusted them was gone forever. In his place was a man who understood that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones most willing to destroy you for profit. Federal agents arrived at my house at 7:30 the next morning. Agent Maria Rodriguez from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division led a team of 3 investigators who spent 6 hours reviewing Marcus's evidence and taking my detailed statement. Mr. Williams, what you've uncovered appears to be a sophisticated criminal enterprise operating across multiple states, Agent Rodriguez said. We'll be coordinating with IRS criminal investigations, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and several local law enforcement agencies. What does that mean for my parents and brother? It means they're facing federal charges that carry significant prison sentences. Identity theft alone can result in 15 years in federal prison. When combined with fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering charges, we're looking at potential sentences measured in decades. The gravity of the situation hit me fully for the first time. My decision to seek justice wasn't just about recovering stolen property. I was potentially sending my family to federal prison for the rest of their lives. Agent Rodriguez, I need you to understand something. As much as I want justice, these are still my family members. Is there any possibility of a plea agreement that would result in restitution rather than maximum prison time? She looked at me with sympathy. That will depend on their cooperation with our investigation and their willingness to help us recover funds for all their victims. However, given the scope and duration of their crimes, some prison time is inevitable. Within hours of the FBI raid beginning, my phone started ringing constantly. Danny called first, his voice panicked and angry. Jarrett, what did you do? Federal agents just arrested me at the apartment. They said I'm being charged with conspiracy and fraud. This is insane. Danny, you stole my car and defrauded multiple families. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd be upset, maybe sue me in civil court. But federal agents? This is my life you're destroying. You destroyed your own life when you chose to become a criminal. I'm your brother. How can you do this to family? The conversation ended when federal marshals took Danny's phone away. He was being held without bail pending his arraignment. My parents called 30 minutes later from the police station where they were being processed. Jarrett, Mom said, her voice shaking. Please call your lawyer and tell them this is all a misunderstanding. We can work this out as a family. Mom, you've been running a criminal enterprise for 4 years. There's no misunderstanding. Criminal enterprise? We're your parents. We made some mistakes, but we're not criminals. Please, don't let them destroy our lives over money. You made the choice to steal from me and 11 other families. You made the choice to forge documents, commit identity theft, and plan tax fraud. These aren't mistakes. These are felonies. Dad took the phone. Son, if you don't drop these charges immediately, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. We know things about your business dealings that could land you in prison too. Dad, my business dealings are completely legal, and making threats isn't going to help your situation. We'll see about that, he said coldly before hanging up. By evening, the story had leaked to local news outlets. My phone rang constantly with reporters asking for comments about the affluent family fraud ring that had been dismantled by federal agents. Sarah Patterson called to update me on the legal proceedings. Your parents and brother have been charged with 15 federal crimes each. The U.S. attorney is treating this as a major white-collar crime case. They're particularly interested in the lawyer who was advising them. Gerald Whitman? Yes. He's been arrested as well. Apparently, he's been providing similar services to several other criminal groups. Your family's case might be the key to dismantling a larger network of legal professionals who facilitate financial crimes. The next few days brought a constant stream of new developments. Other victims began coming forward with stories of fraud perpetrated by my parents. The media coverage intensified as reporters uncovered the scope of their criminal activities. Mrs. Henderson from their country club called me personally. Jarrett, I want you to know how grateful our family is that you had the courage to expose what your parents were doing. We thought our investment losses were just bad luck. We never imagined we were victims of fraud. Similar calls came from other families. The Morrisons, who had lost money in the art investment scam. The Phillips family, who had been defrauded in a fake charity scheme my mother had organized. Each conversation was heartbreaking and infuriating. But the most difficult call came from my childhood friend Tyler, whose family had been among the victims. Jarrett, I need you to know that I don't blame you for what your parents did, he said. But this is really hard for me to process. Your mom was like a second mother to me growing up. I trusted her completely. Finding out she was stealing from my family while hosting me for dinner feels like a complete betrayal of everything I thought I knew about your family. The conversation forced me to confront the broader impact of my parents' crimes. They hadn't just stolen money. They had destroyed decades of relationships, betrayed community trust, and caused emotional trauma to people who had considered them friends. A week after the arrests, Agent Rodriguez called with an update that shocked me even more than anything I had discovered previously. Jarrett, we've been analyzing your parents' financial records and communications. We found evidence that they were planning something much bigger than what they'd already accomplished. Bigger how? They were in the preliminary stages of planning to fake your death. The words didn't register at first. I'm sorry, what? Life insurance fraud. Your parents are the beneficiaries of several large life insurance policies on you. They were researching ways to stage an accidental death that would allow them to collect approximately $15 million in life insurance proceeds. I had to sit down. They were planning to kill me? Not necessarily kill you directly, but certainly to make it appear that you had died accidentally. The most developed plan involved staging a boating accident during one of your business trips overseas. The revelation that my parents had been planning to fake my death for insurance money was beyond anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just theft or fraud anymore. It was a plot that could have resulted in my actual death if something had gone wrong. How advanced were these plans? Preliminary stages, but they had already purchased maritime insurance policies and were researching international locations where accidental deaths would be difficult to investigate thoroughly. I realized that pursuing justice hadn't just protected my financial assets. It might have saved my life. The federal case was moving quickly toward trial, but the psychological impact of learning that my parents had been planning to fake my death would take much longer to process. I had thought the betrayal was complete, but it kept getting deeper and more sinister with each new revelation. The trial began on a rainy Tuesday morning in downtown Los Angeles. Federal courthouse security was tight due to media attention and the high-profile nature of the case. I arrived early, accompanied by Sarah Patterson and Marcus Webb, who would both be testifying about their investigation. U.S. Attorney Jennifer Williams had assembled a prosecution team that specialized in complex financial crimes. The evidence they presented over the first 3 days was overwhelming. Financial records, forged documents, recorded conversations, testimony from victims, and detailed forensic accounting that traced every fraudulent transaction. My parents and Danny sat at the defense table with their expensive attorneys, looking smaller and more ordinary than I remembered. The people who had loomed so large in my life now appeared to be what they actually were: middle-aged criminals who had gotten caught. When I took the witness stand on Thursday morning, the courtroom was packed with victims, media representatives, and federal agents. Prosecutor Williams guided me through my testimony with methodical precision. Mr. Williams, can you describe your relationship with your parents prior to discovering these crimes? I trusted them completely. I considered them loving, supportive parents who were proud of my success. I never questioned their integrity or their motives. When did that perception begin to change? I described finding the empty garage, receiving Danny's casual text message, and slowly uncovering the scope of their criminal activities. As I spoke, I could see several jury members shaking their heads in disbelief. How did it feel to learn that your own family had been systematically stealing from you? Devastating. But learning that they had been stealing from other families was worse. And discovering that they had been planning to fake my death for insurance money was beyond anything I could have imagined. The defense attorneys attempted to portray me as an ungrateful son who was vindictively prosecuting his family over money. Danny's lawyer was particularly aggressive. Mr. Williams, isn't it true that you have more money than you could spend in several lifetimes? That's irrelevant. Theft is theft, regardless of the victim's wealth. But surely family relationships are more important than material possessions? My family chose money over relationships when they decided to become criminals. I'm simply choosing justice over enabling their criminal behavior. Couldn't this have been resolved through family discussion rather than federal prosecution? When I tried family discussion, they threatened me and continued their criminal activities. Criminal behavior requires legal consequences, not family therapy. The cross-examination continued for 2 hours, but the defense couldn't undermine the fundamental facts. My family had committed serious crimes over multiple years, stolen millions of dollars from numerous victims, and shown no remorse for their actions. Danny took the stand on Friday, and his testimony was devastating for my parents. Under intense pressure from federal prosecutors who had offered him a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation, he revealed details that even Marcus hadn't uncovered. My parents started planning financial frauds before I was even involved, he testified. They would spend weeks researching their targets, learning about their businesses, their families, their financial situations. It wasn't impulsive, it was systematic. How long had they been planning to steal from your brother specifically? At least 2 years. They talked about him like he was their retirement plan. They figured he owed them for his education and upbringing, so everything he earned was essentially theirs to take when they needed it. Did they ever express remorse for their actions? Never. They talked about their victims like they were suckers who deserved to be stolen from. My mom would say that rich people who got defrauded were just paying the price for being naive and trusting. Danny's testimony also revealed the extent of their manipulation and planning. They coached me on what to say if anyone questioned me about Jarrett's possessions. They practiced different scenarios, like what to do if he came home early from a business trip, or if neighbors asked questions about why I was at his house. What about the life insurance fraud plan? Danny's voice dropped to almost a whisper. They said it would solve all their financial problems permanently. They talked about it like it was a business transaction, not something that could actually hurt Jarrett. When my parents finally testified in their own defense, their lack of remorse was stunning. Mom took the stand first, and her testimony was a masterclass in self-justification and victim blaming. "I gave birth to that boy, raised him, sacrificed everything for his education and success," she said defiantly. "If he can't share his wealth with his own family, then he learned nothing about gratitude or loyalty." "Mrs. Williams, do you understand that taking someone's property without permission is theft? I understand that family takes care of family. What I took was always intended for family anyway. What about the other families you defrauded? Those people have more money than they know what to do with. They'll recover from their losses. But family relationships, once broken, can never be repaired." Dad's testimony was even worse. He showed absolutely no remorse, and instead attacked my character and business ethics. "My son has become everything I hate about wealthy people," he said from the witness stand. "Selfish, greedy, willing to destroy his own family to protect his precious money. I'm ashamed that I raised someone so heartless." "Mr. Williams, do you accept responsibility for forging your son's signature and stealing his property?" "I take responsibility for trying to help my younger son achieve the same opportunities his brother had. If that's a crime, then I'm proud to be a criminal." The prosecution's closing arguments were devastating. U.S. Attorney Williams methodically reviewed the evidence and the scope of the crimes. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a family that chose crime over character, greed over integrity, and manipulation over love. The defendants didn't steal out of desperation or necessity. They stole because they felt entitled to other people's success. They targeted their own son, not because he had wronged them, but because they had access to him. They targeted their friends and neighbors, not because those people had harmed them, but because they had trust. The evidence shows a pattern of calculated criminal behavior that spanned years and victimized multiple families. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a criminal enterprise operated by people who believed their social status made them immune to consequences. The defense closing arguments focused on family relationships and emotional manipulation. These are parents who loved their son and wanted to help their struggling younger child, Danny's attorney argued. Yes, they made poor choices, but they acted out of love and desperation, not criminal intent. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges for all 3 defendants. Judge Harrison scheduled sentencing for the following month, but before dismissing the court, she addressed my family directly. "I have presided over many criminal cases in my career, but I have rarely seen such a complete absence of remorse or acceptance of responsibility. The defendants seem to believe that family relationships excuse criminal behavior and that wealth makes victims deserving of theft. During this trial, I have learned that the defendants attempted to bribe court officials and intimidate witnesses. These actions demonstrate not only their continued criminal mindset, but their fundamental disrespect for the legal system and the rule of law. Therefore, I am adding charges of obstruction of justice and contempt of court to their existing convictions." As federal marshals led my family away in handcuffs, Mom turned to look at me one final time. Instead of sadness or regret, her expression showed only hatred. "I hope you're satisfied," she mouthed silently. "You've destroyed your own family, but as I watched them being taken away, I realized I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply refused to enable their destruction of other people's lives. The family I thought I had lost had never actually existed. The real family I was grieving was the illusion I had believed in, not the criminals who had finally been held accountable for their choices." 6 months later, I sat in the same courthouse for the sentencing hearing. The media attention had died down, but the courtroom was still filled with victims and their families who wanted to see justice completed. Judge Harrison delivered sentences that reflected the seriousness and scope of the crimes. My parents each received 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole before serving at least 8 years. Danny received 6 years due to his cooperation with the investigation. The defendants operated a sophisticated criminal enterprise that victimized multiple families and caused millions of dollars in financial losses, Judge Harrison stated. More importantly, they betrayed the trust of their community and used their social relationships as tools for criminal exploitation. The court finds no evidence of genuine remorse or rehabilitation potential. The defendants continue to blame their victims and show no understanding of the harm they have caused. The restitution orders were comprehensive. My parents were required to liquidate all assets acquired through criminal proceeds and pay full restitution to every victim. The Rolls-Royce boat tail was returned to me, along with compensation for storage and legal fees. The collector in Dallas, Thomas Morrison, had been incredibly understanding throughout the legal process. He voluntarily returned the car without requiring a court order and even paid for its transportation back to California. I've been collecting luxury automobiles for 30 years, he told me when we met to complete the transfer. I've never encountered a situation like this, but I'm just glad the car is back with its rightful owner. Thomas and I discovered we had similar interests in automotive engineering and classic restoration projects. What began as a criminal case had unexpectedly led to a genuine friendship. 3 months after sentencing, I established the Williams Family Financial Crime Victim Advocacy Foundation. The foundation provides legal assistance, financial counseling, and emotional support to people who have been victimized by family members or trusted individuals. Financial crimes committed by family members create unique trauma, I explained to the foundation's first board meeting. Victims lose not only money and property, but also their sense of trust and family security. Traditional victim services programs aren't equipped to address these complex emotional needs. The foundation's first major case involved helping an elderly couple whose adult children had been systematically draining their retirement accounts through power of attorney fraud. Working with law enforcement and social services, we were able to stop the theft, recover most of their funds, and ensure the perpetrators faced criminal charges. "You saved our lives," the elderly woman told me during our first meeting. "We thought we had no choice but to accept what our children were doing to us. We didn't know we had rights, or that anyone would help us fight back." Each case the foundation handled reinforced an important truth. Family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior, and protecting yourself from toxic people often requires legal action rather than emotional appeals. A year after the trial, I received an unexpected letter from Danny in federal prison. His handwriting was shaky, and the tone was completely different from any communication I had received from him before. "Jarrett, I know this letter probably won't change anything between us, but I need to try to explain something I've finally understood after months of mandatory counseling and reflection. What we did to you wasn't borrowing or sharing or family helping family. It was theft, fraud, and betrayal. I participated in planning crimes against my own brother because I was jealous of your success and resentful that my life hadn't turned out the way I wanted. Mom and Dad convinced me that you owed us something for being successful while I struggled. But success isn't something you owe other people. It's something you earn through work, decisions, and sometimes luck. My failures weren't your responsibility to fix. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking you to drop charges or reduce sentences. I'm writing because I finally understand that what we did was wrong, and I want you to know that at least one member of our family recognizes the truth. I hope someday I can build a life based on honest work and real relationships instead of entitlement and manipulation. Thank you for stopping us before we destroyed more lives." The letter was the first genuine communication I had received from any family member since this whole situation began. It didn't change the past, but it offered hope that people can learn from consequences and choose better paths forward. My parents never wrote similar letters. According to Danny's occasional communications, they remained convinced that they were victims of an ungrateful son and an unfair legal system. Some people cannot accept responsibility for their choices no matter how clear the evidence becomes. 2 years after the trial, I met Amanda Richardson at a charity gala for white-collar crime victims. She was an attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse cases and had heard about my foundation's work. "I've been following your story since the trial," she said during our first conversation. "What you did took incredible courage. Most people wouldn't have prosecuted their own family members, even for serious crimes." "Justice isn't about relationships," I replied. "It's about right and wrong." Amanda and I began working together on complex family financial crime cases. Our professional partnership gradually developed into personal relationship built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine trust. "You know what I admire most about you?" she told me one evening as we reviewed case files in my home office. "You didn't let betrayal make you cynical or bitter. You channeled your experience into helping other people. I learned that holding people accountable for their choices doesn't mean you hate them," I explained. "Sometimes accountability is the most loving thing you can do, even when it's painful." 3 years after the trial, the foundation had helped over 200 families recover from financial crimes committed by relatives or trusted individuals. We had assisted in prosecuting dozens of cases and recovered millions of dollars in stolen assets. But more importantly, we had helped people understand that they deserved protection from crime regardless of their relationship to the perpetrator. Families should be based on love, respect, and mutual support. I often told victims during our initial consultations, when family members choose crime over character, they forfeit the protection that family relationships normally provide. Protecting yourself from criminals isn't betraying family. It's choosing to break cycles of abuse and manipulation that damage everyone involved. The life lesson this experience taught me was profound and permanent. True family bonds are built on integrity, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Blood relationships don't excuse criminal behavior, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to hold them accountable for their destructive choices. People who genuinely love you don't steal from you, manipulate you, or plan to destroy your life for financial gain. Those who do such things have already severed the family bonds through their own actions. Justice isn't about revenge or punishment for its own sake. Justice is about protecting society from people who choose to harm others and creating consequences that might motivate behavioral change. My parents chose crime over character, greed over family relationships, and manipulation over honesty. They lost their freedom, their social status, and their relationship with their children because of those choices. But I chose justice over enabling, truth over family mythology, and protection of future victims over preservation of toxic relationships. Those choices led to genuine relationships built on trust rather than obligation, meaningful work that helps vulnerable people, and peace of mind that comes from knowing I stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Sometimes the family that raised you isn't your real family. Sometimes your real family consists of people who choose to love and support you, based on who you are rather than what you can provide for them. Today, I'm surrounded by people who care about me as a person, not as a source of financial benefit. My life is built on authentic relationships, honest work, and the satisfaction that comes from using my experience to protect other people from similar betrayals. The boy who trusted blindly is gone, but the man who learned to trust wisely has built a life worth living. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? How do you balance protecting yourself while still believing in the possibility of genuine relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding justice. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they deserve protection from toxic behavior, even from family members. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you understand that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for building a life based on truth rather than manipulation. Remember, you deserve relationships built on respect, honesty, and genuine care. Never let anyone convince you that family ties excuse criminal behavior or that love requires accepting abuse. Stay strong, trust wisely, and never stop believing that justice and healing are possible.